Okay, today we're going to removing and cleaning the throttle body on an m112 Mercedes m112 V6. The m113 V8 is basically the same thing. These two engines share most of their parts. They're modular engines. They share all the pistons, piston rings, valves, valve guides, valve gas, springs, blah, 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 blah. Everything else is basically the same, other than one's got 2 more cylinders than the other. All the electronics on the outside, all the ancillaries like the air hoses, the evap system, all that stuff is basically the same. Intake air is a little bit different because the V8 needs more air. It's got 2 air cleaners, and some of the V6s have 2 air cleaners depending on the configuration. My SLK has a lower hood line, so the air box isn't out here. There's less room. It's in the middle. There's 2 air filters on top of the engine. What's a reason you might need to do it? Well, I mean, high mileage cars, you should do it just for the heck of it. It's about an hour job, not difficult at all. And okay, what can your throttle body can cause? Generally poor idle. That's what you're going to find. You're not going to find it once the throttle's opened. Once the throttle is opened up, any of the dirty dirt and crud that builds up around the butterfly flap inside of the air valve, or the throttle body, it's all free flowing past there, and you're not really going to notice it. Generally, you're going to notice a lumpy idle or a bad idle, which could also be a MAF sensor. It could also be a plugged air filter, could be fuel injectors, could be all kinds of things. But this is just a routine maintenance set. I mean, my car's got 275,000 kilometers at 16 years old. Pretty sure it's never been off. So yeah, might as well do it. So anyway, I'm going to remove the engine cover and then be back in a few minutes. Okay, so I'm going to pop off the air box. 2 clips. Make sure you don't lose this rubber. There's a rubber ring in there. Don't lose that seal. This air box. Pull the front snorkel. It goes up into the front grille. Like a plastic snorkel. It goes up in there. Come on out. It might not want to come out. Doesn't even need to. I can rotate it down out of the way. Pull the air box up and off. Just pull straight up. Come on. Why don't you want to pull out? Okay, I'm going to unclip it. It doesn't want to pull out. Good time to check my air filter too. Top off. Let's see how bad the air filter is. I can still see tons of light through it. It's fine. Why don't you want to come off? This one pad doesn't want to release here. Wow. There we go. That was being a little bugger. And then there's a rad hose on the front of this one. Get this out of the way. MAF sensor, squeeze the 2 tabs on the side and pull it out. And now for the intake air hose, rotate this up. It's like a baffle. And there should be 1 bolt here. I can't remember, it's a T10. I can never remember. Right in front, I'll get the I'll get the flashlight or the shop light over here, and I'll get the screwdriver and take this off. It's right by the transmission dipstick. Back in 1 second. Okay, so we've rotated up the little boom box on the intake. This is like a sound deadener for intake air, and when it goes back down this little spot here, that little finger goes down over top of that little round rubber pad and pushes down into there. And back here, you can see right in front of my finger is an E10 Torx. It's attached to the intake. It's an E10 Torx bit, which is an E-Torx, which is a reverse Torx. You can use a 10 millimeter wrench on it, because they're not on that tight. I need 2 hands to hold the hose pass. I'm just going to loosen that and then pull this off. Back in a second. Okay, so that bolt is loosened. I'm just going to pull that off. And now you're going to reach under the back of the intake. Follow with your hand all the way back to where it curves in. And right underneath, oops, where am I? Right underneath here, straight under. When you go under with your hand, you're going to feel a little round tab on your side, on the side closest to you. And you pull down on that and then wiggle it back and out. And I'll show you the tab and everything once I take the box out. Back in a second. Okay, so what you're going to do, lights and everything in the way. I apologize for doing this in the dark. Again, hand on the bottom, push that little tab down, rotate up, the whole barrel up, and you see this little locking clip here. Pull it away. You may have to stick a screwdriver in here and gently pry the 2 sides apart, and it should pull away like that. And now I'm just going to snake this out and apparently plug my camera into recharge because it's dying. Okay, great. So it's going to be even darker when I'm doing this. Okay, I'm going to plug this in back in a minute. Now, as you're pulling the air box up, you'll notice that there's still a breather hose attached right here. The air box, the intake air tube, right here to your breather for the driver's side cylinder bank. Now you can either unhook it here, like I've done, because it's just impossible for me to get my hand in there and unhook it when it's on the intake tube, and then pull the whole thing out. Let's see if I can show you that before the camera dies again. Takes a little bit of fidgeting. Because the tube on the other side has to come out as well. Remember, it's got to sneak in under all that stuff. There we go. So this is where it attaches. Right there. But for some reason, mine does not like to unhook from this side. Actually, I'm going to loosen it up, put this back on, and then plug it into here when I'm done. I'm going to pull this off now out of here, so it's easier to snake it back in when I'm done. So anyway, now that that's off, make sure the key is out of your car. Ignition off, key out. Don't need to remove the battery, the negative battery cable. You can if it makes you feel better. Anyway, back in a minute. Okay, before we go any further, I'm going to explain something about the key. I mention this all the time, and it's probably good to elaborate on it. The key, whenever you're working on anything electronic in your engine, anywhere in the car, on a Mercedes, your key should be out of the ignition. And not just turned off, but pulled out and not in the ignition. And the reason for this is when you plug the key into the ignition, it wakes up some of the CAN system, the CAN bus. And some of those things that are awakened, I don't know what's exactly everything that's awakened when you do just put the key in. When you turn to the first position or second position, certain things are awakened, but just pushing the key in awakens certain systems, and you don't want to be unplugging and plugging things in the key's in the ignition, and certain systems could be unhooked and hooked back up by plugging them in and out when you're under the car or under the hood. So it's best to just leave the key out. and don't worry about that, and you won't have a problem. It could cause serious problems if there's arcing when you plug it back in, because that system is live, because that wire's live. Could cause all kinds of engine faults, check engine lights and stuff. So don't even bother. Just, again, remove the key, take the key out, put it in your pocket. Just make sure it's not in the ignition. Anyway, I'm gonna let this camera charge a little bit longer. I'm just waiting for it to charge so I can remove this damn throttle body and show you. Okay, so it's a T40 Torx key, or Torx socket, or Torx screwdriver, whatever you want to call it. You can see in there, that's one of the top bolts. Two bottoms are out. They're not in very strong. They're probably in at about 8 to 10 foot-pounds. So that's 3. I'm going to take the 4th one. You're doing all this by feel. You can't really see where you're... I don't have any feeling in my frickin' hands, which makes it hard. Oh, I think I got it. No way. Sweet. Yes, I think I did. No, I'm gonna have to get this one from the other side of the car, I think. Anyway, they're not in there very tight, and they're not a problem to remove. So I've actually left the hose hooked up on the one that goes on top of the throttle body. I've left it hooked up. I forgot it's got the vacuum line for the throttle, for the brake booster, the brake vacuum line going into there. So I just want to make sure that it's going to clear this pipe here, the fuel rail. So if I pull up on it, I don't know if it's going to clear it or not. So I'll pull the throttle body out first. I don't know if I loosened that bolt. No, I didn't even get my tool on it. So anyway, 3 bolts out. I'll show you what they look like. Right here. Sorry about the light. I do apologize. Again, I work when I can. So I'm going to pull that 4th one out and I'll be back in a sec. Okay, 4th bolt is out. Oh God, working around cameras is not fun. There we go. So I'm going to slide it out, pull the top air hose. See, you can see the black. Hopefully you can see around my hand. Let's put that throttle body down for a second. See the black tube in there? That is the plastic vacuum line for the brake booster. And now we're lifting the throttle body. See the electrical connector down there? It should push in and pull out. I want to make sure which way this one goes. Yeah, the 2 tabs on the side. I think I need a screwdriver to do that. God, I hate doing this with all plastics. Oh no, just push them in. So squeeze on both sides and pull. Might take an awful lot of squeezing. Like I said, 16 years in here. Okay, but you can see the tab. When I push it, it releases this little, see a little notch in there? When I push on it there, on both sides, it's releasing it. Come on, squeeze and pull. Okay, it's gonna take a few minutes of wiggling this sucker off. But anyway, you can see the throttle body is gonna come out of there in the electrical connection. So I'm gonna put this down for 2 seconds, turn off the camera, and I don't wanna hurry myself and possibly break a piece of brittle old plastic, so I'm going to wiggle that off gently, which may take a few minutes, and I'll be back in a second with the throttle body out. So on the intake manifold here, you can see there's a black rubber O-ring, and this is now 2 hours after I've done filmed the last segment, because I've been looking for my damn black rubber O-ring that I bought for this and I can't find it. And since it's almost midnight, I'm going to have to just clean this off and put some RTV sealant on the on top, and hopefully that doesn't leak. I did have actually a small little leak on the near the top where it was getting past the rubber O-ring. So I'm going to clean all this up with, again, intake manifold cleaner, carb cleaner, throttle body cleaner. Clean that up. I'm not going to take that O-ring out because I don't have the new one. I have it somewhere, I just can't find it. But I'll show you this is the inside. This is the outer part going into the intake manifold. And it's fairly clean in there, but you see the black grooves around there. That's where it's going to get all gummed up for the and stop the airflow. But I had a leak. Well, I cleaned it off with my finger right up around here. Or no, where was it? Right up around here. That was black and sooted up, so it was getting past that rubber O-ring, and you can see it here too, where it's getting, oops, you can see it here where it's getting past the O-ring as well. So I'm going to clean that up, and I'm going to put a small, just really thin layer of RTV on top of that, and I'm going to clean this whole thing up with, don't scrape this down. This is aluminum, so don't scrape this down with a razor blade. Don't use sandpaper. Just clean this off, and if you're going to use sandpaper, use like a 500 or 600 grit to polish it. Don't scrape this because you will make air leaks. And the shiny spot going around there is basically where the rubber O-ring is supposed to seal. So again, I'm just going to clean all this off. Again, carb cleaner, intake throttle body cleaner. You could probably even use MAF sensor, mass airflow sensor cleaner on this as well. But I'm going to use a bit of that and a little bit of seafoam, which cleans everything up. And back in a few minutes once this is all clean. Okay, so throttle body's all cleaned up, and I put a very, very thin layer of RTV red high temperature sensor safe, meaning that it doesn't contain silicone. You do not want silicone getting into your engine because it doesn't burn up. Anyway, very, very thin skim coat on there after I've cleaned everything up. And I'm going to reinstall, which is basically just the reverse of taking it out. Anything to look for? I'm trying to think. It'd be nice to look for that damn O-ring continue, but I can just use it on the SLK. I'll do the SLKs this week as well. If I'm doing this one, I might as well do it. But like I said, I had the tiniest little bit of a stumble in the ML320 at idle. I knew the MAF sensor was fine, and I figured I must have an intake leak somewhere, and there was, I think it was up here, the tiniest little bit of leaking past the rubber O-ring there. I've cleaned off the intake manifold there where this bolt's on, where the O-ring is. I've left the O-ring in place, and again put a little bit of RTV sealant on here, or red high temp gasket, and it is sensor safe, does have to be sensor safe. I'm going to bolt it back on. I will give you the torque specs for the bolts. I got to look those up right now before I put them on. I think they're around 10 or 12 foot-pounds. Shouldn't be too much. There is nothing else really to tell you. Oh, I will make one more video. We're going to have to reteach idle. We're going to have to relearn idle on this throttle, on the throttle body when it goes back on. So it's going to have to be retaught idle. That's like a 2-minute procedure, or 5 minutes, just turning your key on for 5 minutes. I've got another video on that, but I'll go over it again at the end after I get this all put back together. So back in, well, about a few minutes. Okay, so the throttle body is now bolted back on, and it's just a matter of hooking up the intake pipes again. I could not find a torque spec on those bolts, on those T40 Torx bolts. So I went about 15 foot-pounds. They're aluminum, they're into aluminum, so you don't want to torque them too hard. I would say a little less than a spark plug torque, so around 12 to 15 foot-pounds should probably be okay. They just have to be snug. They don't have to be, you know, don't crank them on. They are not a lug nut. Don't crank the hell out of them. Just snug them up pretty good. If I can find, I'm going to go check my files again, but they're all in the house. and I'm going to check and see if I can find an actual torque spec, but right now I can't find one, so I've done them about 15 foot-pounds. So I'm going to put everything back together and show you the idle reset. Okay, real quickie on the intake, when you're putting this back in, this top locator, get that in first, push it in first, and then rotate down until the bottom clip down there. See the clip? That's the one that you push down, the little roundy thing. That's the one you push down to release it. You put the top in first and then rotate down until that snaps. You'll hear it click into place. And hook all your vent hoses and stuff back up. Don't forget to put the one onto the top of the throttle body that goes to your brake vacuum booster and all the other vacuum lines. Don't forget that one. And anyway, back in a second with the idle relearn. Okay, so we're all back together. Just 5 minutes to put all the air box and the intake and everything back on. I haven't put the engine cover on yet, but I'm going to do the idle relearn. You're just going to take your key, stick it in the ignition, turn to the point where all your warning lights come on, and just leave it for 10 minutes, sitting like that. Turn the fan off so I'm not draining the battery. And yes, it's 11 o'clock. Oh, I thought it was later. Thank God it's only 11. I still got stuff to do tonight. Oh, yeah, looking for that O-ring. Yeah, leave it like this for 10 minutes and the electronic idle will find, it'll just keep hunting around and then eventually settle where it's supposed to do. This is how you reteach your idle. Again, I have a video on this. If you do have a lumpy idle or bad idle, do this first before you take anything apart. Just try the idle reset. Again, there's another video on it, but this is all there is to the idle reset. Just basically turn the key till all your warning lights come on, the last position before you start the car. Car's not running, leave it for 10 minutes. Turn it off, start the car. And that should be it. I'll let you know if anything is not working properly. Everything should be fine. I can't see any issues coming up with this. Should be about an hour job. It took me 3 because I'm hunting for parts, which I should have sitting right out in front of me before I even started. But either way, I can use that on the other car. Same engine, same parts mostly. Thanks for watching.